A day after a heartbreaking loss for the Toronto Blue Jays in which Teoscar Hernandez walked them off in crazy fashion in Seattle, he spoke out on a potential Toronto Blue Jays reunion, and it's something that could legitimately happen. We don't know whether the Seattle Mariners will sell at the deadline. They may get hot and sneak into the playoffs, but it's something that the Jays should definitely explore. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. I'm filming this video from beautiful Seattle, Washington, as I'm getting set to go to Game 2 of a 3-game set between the Blue Jays and Mariners. It's been a great time. The atmosphere yesterday was unbelievable. So many great Blue Jay fans showed out, and the atmosphere was just incredible, Nick. It's something that we definitely got to do us too sometime in the future, but it's just great to be in Seattle here, and of course, a familiar face in very familiar Blue Jay fashion walked them off yesterday, and there's something brewing between the two sides that could maybe result in a potential return.
Yeah, the guy who walked them off, obviously Teoscar Hernandez, spoke out on a potential reunion. Before we get to that, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and hopefully the Jays can go ahead and win today after a brutal loss yesterday. But we're going to put that loss behind us and focus on a potential trade deadline acquisition as the rumors start to heat up day in and day out. And Hazel May tweeted that on the Fan 590 on today's Blair and Barker show, this was of course yesterday, Mariners slugger Teoscar Hernandez joined the show and said if there was a chance to come back to the Toronto Blue Jays, he would. Check out the podcast for more of Hernandez's comments. But I saw this on Twitter and I don't know if I would say I was shocked, because we were planning on doing this anyway, a video on Teoscar Hernandez reunion, because it makes so much sense for definitely the Blue Jays, but kind of both sides to a degree if the Mariners fall out of contention. And the Blue Jays can kind of, if they win the next 2 games, they can really push them towards out of contention. But Blair and Barker asked, they said, would you be open to a return to the Blue Jays if they trade for you, maybe even extending, who knows? And he said, like you said there, he would. Peter, what are your thoughts on this? And we'll get into some potential, just discussing what it would take as well as his stats. But he is a lefty masher who has played surprisingly good defense this season. I don't know. I'd be open to a reunion. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't think so, just because of how weird that would be, but it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, the Mariners are hovering around 500, and they might get hot. They might sneak into the playoffs. Like, the Yankees are losing. The Astros aren't exactly world beaters this season, so they have a chance to gun for that 3rd and final wild card spot. So I don't think they'll necessarily be selling, and the Blue Jays, I still would do that trade in a heartbeat. Eric Swanson has been unbelievable for this team, and he's going to be there for another 4 years at least, right? So it was a good trade. It worked out for both sides. Teoscar Hernandez is still a very good hitter, though, and he was a 2-time Silver Slugger award winner with the Toronto Blue Jays and a career 880 OPS against lefties, if I'm not mistaken, which is something that the Blue Jays desperately need. They're missing a middle-of-the-order bat. Let's not kid ourselves. They've had a tough time manufacturing runs, and he would be at the top of the leaderboards alongside Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for most runs batted in on the Blue Jays. So I would definitely be open to a reunion. I don't think it would take that much to acquire him, but he does have a pretty hefty salary attached to his name, about $15 million. So the Blue Jays would have to move some money around to make that work, but I would definitely be open to that, Nick.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the reasons they did trade Teoscar Hernandez in the first place was because they didn't think that they would want to necessarily extend him at the end of the year, given his, lackluster defense, at least in the past. And yeah, let's make it very, very clear. Phenomenal trade for the Blue Jays, and the Mariners, I'm sure, are happy with it as well. But we got a prospect who's kind of storming up the rankings in Adam Macko and Swanson, who's been one of our most valuable relievers just alongside a couple other guys. So that trade has been phenomenal, but getting him back would be very, very interesting. You can see his Baseball Savant page this year, and it's some stuff that we're not as used to seeing. His hitting is, what it usually is. He strikes out a ton. He doesn't really walk. He chases a ton. We're used to those down-and-away sliders, him swinging at it. But his defense has been significantly better this year. It's hovered around, average to slightly above average, and coming from when he was on the Blue Jays, it was really, really bad. There's nothing else you could say, and the Jays wanted to change their defense to make it much better in Varsho and Kiermaier, which they have, but his defense has been better this year. His hitting has not been as good, but he started to get hot recently. He's a pretty streaky player. He's already up to 127 strikeouts in just 97 games, but he has a huge track record. He has a 730 OPS. Hitting's kind of down across Major League Baseball, but again, like you said, he absolutely mashes lefties, and that's someone we need, and that's someone that Ross Atkins said that they're going to go for, is a right-handed hitter. It doesn't really matter the position he said, but a lefty masher, and Teoscar fits the bill. He's on a, can't re-sign with the Blue Jays. Well, he could re-sign, but he's not going to have a contract after this year. This is his last year, so I don't know. It could be very interesting. He might not cost very much because he doesn't have any term left.
Yeah, the Jays have been playing some pretty good baseball as of late, and let's not look at the last 4 games and say that the season is down the drain. They have been pretty good, but they are making a playoff push, and they do need another bat, whether it's Teoscar Hernandez, whether it's Jorge Soler at the deadline, or someone of that nature, someone that hits for power, that can drive in runs. It's something that is desperately needed for the Toronto Blue Jays. And I think him getting traded away by the Jays front office was a bit of a wake-up call for him. He realized that maybe his performance in the outfield was lackluster. Maybe he wasn't hustling enough on the bases, and he's totally changed that narrative about him. He's been everything that the Mariners could have asked for and more. He's been one of their better hitters over the last couple of months. And if you look at the numbers overall, they're not exactly amazing. They wouldn't blow you away, but he's still a very good power hitter. And let's not kid ourselves. The Jays would welcome him back in a heartbeat, in a more limited role. Of course, he wouldn't be playing every day like he used to for the Jays, but still, having that guy in your lineup 3, 4, 5 times a week, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and the question is what it would take to get Teoscar Hernandez, and as well as some of the other guys that you mentioned, Jorge Soler. There's also some talk around Cody Bellinger. He obviously hits from the left side, so that would be a bit more of an interesting one, but it kind of depends. Blue Jays made their first kind of trade of the trade deadline yesterday, getting Genesis Cabrera from the St. Louis Cardinals, which, very, very interesting trade. But I think the Jays are going to be very, very active. And Ross Atkins said in one of his press conferences that there's still over 20 teams that are on the fence about whether they're going to buy or sell this year, which kind of bodes well for the Blue Jays, but it also makes it more likely that both teams, or all teams around the league, are going to wait to see, especially the Blue Jays, until the deadline. And if Teoscar Hernandez ultimately is available, I would say that he's probably one of the highest, rated guys on the market, just because of, not only the poor market, but he has a track record that speaks for himself here. He's 19th in MVP voting in 2021, 11th in 2020, and he's always been very, very good. And it's a very good point you mentioned there. Maybe he wanted to kind of bring it to the Blue Jays a little bit and improve his defense and his base running since he got traded for. Realistically, that was the main reason. If he was a good defender, they would have signed him with a heartbeat, but they wanted to get someone like, Dalton Varsho to replace him in the outfield. So, I don't know. It's a very, very interesting, reunion talk, and him saying he would join back. Of course, he's friends with all those guys is, very, very interesting. However, do the Blue Jays want to, get him back? Probably. Who knows what it'll take, though.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. The Jays are trying to make a playoff push, and they're trying to make this team better at all costs, and they should be doing that. You can't hold on to prospects and wait for them to pan out, because your team is built to win right now, and you got to make that team better in whichever way you can. And I saw Teoscar Hernandez. He went over to the Blue Jays side of the field yesterday. He was hugging the guys. He was laughing. He was smiling, and you could tell that he loved being here, and he loved playing in front of those fans up in Toronto. And I'm sure they would welcome him back with open arms as well. He's a great player. I don't think you'd have to give up too much to get him, but it's also an ego thing. It's a pride thing for the Blue Jays front office. They traded him away, and now they're going to look like cowards if they go ahead and trade for him back. So maybe they're hesitant on that front. They don't want to trade for him because they traded him away, because there was this whole narrative and culture shift that they were looking to achieve, and now they're crying to get him back. So it'll be interesting to monitor. I love Teoscar Hernandez as a player. Too bad he wasn't in the outfield yesterday, because I would have shouted his name from the right field bleachers. But just a great player, a great character, and a great locker room guy as well. So I loved his time here with the Blue Jays, and I'd love to see it extend a little bit longer.
Yeah, and we need a left-handed, masher, or right-handed hitting mashing your left-handed. So hopefully he can maybe make a reunion. And not only would it be interesting, it'd be very fun for us Blue Jays fans, and of course making videos as well on a Teoscar Hernandez return. But that'll wrap it up, Peter. Hopefully he plays in the outfield today, so you can chirp him a little bit or do whatever you want to do. And thank you guys for watching.
No chirping, no chirping. I'm going to tell him I love him, because I really do. Really do.
We all miss him, and thank you guys for watching. And hopefully the Jays can get a well-needed win today. See you tomorrow.
Thanks.